What's up, guys, and welcome back to Beyond the Void Horror Podcast. My name is Alex, and today we're going to be doing a spoiler-free review of a movie that just came out on Shudder called Death Valley. And it's quite interesting. Let's get into it. Have you ever wondered what a movie from the actor of Psycho Goreman, the actual character Psycho Goreman who played the monster, what a movie of his choosing would be? Well, look no further, because this is his movie. That's right, Matthew Ninabar is the director and writer of this movie. He was the monster in this year's one of the most ridiculous comedies of this year called Psycho Goreman. He played that character, and he also plays the monster in this movie. He is an actor that has turned director and writer, or sort of kind of always been, but he's done a couple of other movies like Transference and Extraction Day. So what is Death Valley? It's about two mercenaries who go in to save a bioengineer who is trapped in a Cold War bunker that is literally protected against nuclear bombs. And when they go inside to try to retrieve her, things get a little bit complicated when they come across this fella. Or rather, multiples of this fella. Now, there's much more to the story than that, and I won't spoil it for you here, but there are a lot of similarities to other movies that I have seen, like Resident Evil, Doom, the actual live-action movie that they did, and this is on a little bit more of a smaller budget, obviously, than both of those movies, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not a good thing either for this particular movie. Now, some of the cast in this movie, we have a lot of actors that have not been in a whole lot of movies, so you're going to get a kind of mixed bag of acting in here. We have Jeremy Ninabar, who is obviously related to the director in some fashion. He's been in many of his other movies. Ethan Mitchell, who plays his buddy, and of course we also have Kristen Castor, who is the bioengineer in this movie. Now, there are some twists in this movie that I don't know if they necessarily landed. I typically try to be a little bit more understanding on the indie scale of reviews because they are working with a lot less money than you would normally get for a movie that would need a much bigger budget to perform as well as the types of movies that this movie is sort of mimicking. Like I said, Resident Evil, Doom, and many others. This is an action horror film with heavy presence on the action part. In fact, I don't think we really saw too much horror in this movie. Aside from the very opener, we didn't really get to see that much horror for at least 30 to 45 minutes. So it is a lot of guns ablazing, people running through trees, and a lot of bad dialogue, unfortunately. Now, this is hard for me because I fucking absolutely adore Psycho Goreman, and Matthew Ninabar is awesome in that movie, and I just don't know that while I like the groove in which he is writing, as far as the movie that we're talking about here, Death Valley, I like the groove in which he's carving or writing within, but I'm not so much into the dialogue that he wrote for the particular characters. They say, you borrow from those who are greater than you in order to get your balance and footing to understand your own sort of dialogue and sort of craft. Whether you're a writer and a musician, you sort of mimic other things and then come up with your own sort of thing. And this one's a little too on the nose for a lot of familiarity as far as like movies that I've seen, that it's hard for me to kind of separate myself from those specific things that are very specific and are very much present in this movie. Now, the dialogue that I was talking about is very action-centric. You got your one-liners. There's a couple of things that are thrown in here that maybe you and I would say to each other, but I have a hard time picturing these characters necessarily saying that to one another. If that makes sense. I don't know if the characters were fully realized, although they do characterize them in different traits. Like, a lot of people have been saying that one of the main stars, Jeremy Ninabar, who plays Beckett, is a dead ringer for Leo. in fucking Resident Evil, which I totally agree with. And then you have Kristen Castor, who plays Chloe, who is a goddamn dead ringer for Martha Quinn from MTV. Do you remember her? Clearly younger, but you get the point.
Anybody want a Tic Tac? I have some.
I just kept thinking like she was gonna snap into a music video. This movie did kind of make my mind drift a little bit because some of the acting and the dialogue was a little rough for wear. And because this movie didn't do anything too beyond average, it's really hard for me to give this a better score than I'm going to give it. I would say with all the action and the lack of gore in this movie needed a lot more gore than it had. There was like really not that much at all. And I understand that these are very costly items, but I think in a day and age where when you're trying to appeal to a mainstream audience and sort of the tried and true horror fans, I think you owe it to just add a little bit of gore. Even those mainstream movies throw it in there because they know that it will beef it up a little bit. I think if they had a little bit more money to be able to put more gore in, it would have been a better film overall. Gore doesn't always save a film. It just adds to the film, in my opinion. So that's where I'm coming from. I will say that, you know, the creature is pretty cool looking, although it does kind of feel a little reminiscent of those like brain creatures in Resident Evil 2 with the tongues that come out and they crawl on the ceilings and stuff. It has some reminiscence to that, only way beefier. Yeah, there's some things that are about this creature that they can only do one thing and not another. I won't spoil that for you, but I don't think that it really added to anything in here because it kind of broke the logic of the creature in the movie by it being able to do certain things that without this thing that it had, it wouldn't be able to do this other thing. So my suspension of disbelief was kind of shattered at that point in time. And I have a pretty strong one. You know, I can suspend my disbelief pretty heavily for some of the movies that I've had. I don't know. Maybe this just wasn't for me. There were just a couple of moments where some of the dialogue, I just was like, oh no. Like tonally, if the movie is trying to be something that is like very serious, then I have a hard time understanding if it's a joke or not. And sometimes a movie has to win you over to make sure that you feel that way. It is a little conflicting when you add two different elements in like comedy and like, you know, that action comedy sort of style where it's like kind of entertaining, but sometimes it feels a little out of place when the whole movie's been very serious. So it's a little bit of a dichotomy going on there as far as that. If some of the dialogue was meant to be cheesy, you know, I don't know that that would really change the score for me that much because it wasn't the kind of good cheesy in my opinion. Negatives aside though, there is some action and some story in there that is kind of interesting, although it does borrow from Doom in my opinion, and some Resident Evil kind of feeling. And this whole movie feels like those two movies, which is a shame because it really detracts from something original that could be original and could be written to be its own certain thing. But, you know, at the end of the day, I would say that this movie is probably like a 4 out of 10. It's just below average for me in some regards, and I want to like it a lot more. I feel like the movie has a lot more heart than score for me, but unfortunately that's just how I felt about this movie. There's still some fun to be had here if you're going to watch it. I mean, if you have a subscription to Shudder, might as well give it a shot anyway. You may like it more than I did. I haven't seen the director's other movies, but I would be interested in seeing what he has in the future to see if he can sort of correct some of these things. I think the big problem for me is the writing. And it's, you know, again, I understand the place from which he's writing. He's writing from a place where this is something I like, but it just, the finer tuning things like dialogue and stuff, it just wasn't working for me. So, but what do you guys think? Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe you love this film and you thought it was amazing. Have you seen it yet? Have you watched the trailer? Did you not know anything about this film and are going to check it out to prove me wrong? All answers are correct. Please let me know what you think about this movie in the comment section down below. And as always, long live the boys.